morning I actually want to talk about the word activate. Activate.
What chapter did you say?
1
12.
Corinthians 12. I don't know if there's like certain type of super glue type solutions that, remember, you have to mix two items together to activate them, right? Like individually neither one of these work, but when you put them together it instantly bonds, and so it becomes what? Activated, and there's so many times like that there are things that like Becky has been making some laundry detergent, but ever so often you have to mix it up because everything separates and stuff, and it doesn't have the same consistency, so you have to stir it up and activate it. And I like the fact that God has given us gifts and abilities and things that we can do and that we need to learn to activate. So let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 12. We're going to look at verses 4 through 11. It talks about the fact that there are lots of us involved in this body of Christians. And in verse 4 it says, there are diversities of gifts but the same Spirit. There are differences of ministries but the same Lord. And there are diversities of activities, but it is the same God who works all in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the profit of all. And for to one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another the word of knowledge through the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another different kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But one and the same Spirit works all these things, distributing to each one individually as He wills. And if you continue reading on through this passage, it talks a lot. It still continues on this concept of God giving gifts. But what I like is if you go down to verse 28, it talks about not only the fact that apostles and prophets and teachers and those who do miracles and healings, but it also says those who do helps and administrations. I find that very interesting because a lot of times we see a job or a gift within the church, right? We see pretty simple, right? There's Sunday school teachers, there's worship leaders, right? There's all these certain positions, but we have to understand that we're all working together to reach a goal. We're all in this world together, but we're all in this church together. And it takes each and every single one of us to make this happen. Like, for instance, it wouldn't do me any good to stand up here and preach if nobody was listening. You know what I'm saying? It wouldn't do us any good if we didn't have, floors vacuumed, or it wouldn't do us any good. All these different things have to come together, and it's not like one is more important than the other. And so sometimes we have to look and realize that God has gifted us. Okay? And I think it's interesting because it's the fact that God chooses who He wants to give gifts to. And so if He has gifted you with something, then guess what? It's for you. It's made by Him. And not only does that, but God allows there to be an activation level there so that way you can run with this gift, right? It's not just something that we can theorize about or have in our heads or whatever, but it's something that we can actually put to work. And I love it because God says that He works all in all. In fact, if you read through this passage, it talks about the fact that He does this one to another because, like, this person has this gift, this person has this gift. But if you'll notice throughout this, it talks about all these different gifts, and these gifts actually feed into each other, and benefit each other, right? And so it's not just about one thing or, mine's better than yours is or yours is better than mine is. And I've noticed that also at times that God will give you special gifts, not just so much things that you can do all the time, but sometimes there's just things that, come to you. Like, for instance, I am not in any light, I don't feel like a prophet, but there have been times when God has given me a word to say to somebody, and I went and said it, and it was true and everything. And it's interesting because that isn't my like special gifting, you know. It's not like I can walk up and just do that all the time, but there are times when God can use that. So in having gifts that you kind of find out, don't be discouraged or don't think it weird if God gives you something else. Why? Because once you activate your gift, then He knows that He can continue to give to you, right? Because you're using that gift. It would be like, for instance, if I gave my kids a, let's say, a video game console, okay? You know, kids love video game consoles. And I gave it to them, but they never played with it. I would begin to think that they didn't look highly on my gift, right? Or they just, you know, just lost interest or whatever. But if they go and activate, start using it, then guess what? Ever so often, get them a new game, or you know, or get them a different thing. And why? Because they're using that gift that I've given them, and then I see that they're enjoying it, and so I can add to that then later on. And in fact, in 1 Timothy, and you don't have to go here, but 1 Timothy, Paul is talking to Timothy and talks about the fact that he's young. Don't let people put you down because you're young. But what it says here is, it says, do not neglect the gift that is in you. And so we have to understand that there are these gifts inside of us that we have not tapped into. You know? I'm reminded so many times that there will be something that I just kind of, whatever, you know, don't think a thing about. Like when I got to college, I didn't realize, I had never tried to sing before. I mean, I sang in church, you know, but not like done any kind of solos or anything like that. And so I'd never really looked at that. Well, then in college, that was one of the things, you know, one of the things you could get involved in. So I got involved in it. Sure enough, hey, I can sing, you know. But it's interesting because I don't feel like singing is like a gifting or a calling for me. But at the same time, God has given me the ability to do it, so why would I not do it? And I've actually been kind of raked over the coals here by quite a few people, just because they said that, hey, you can sing, why don't you sing? I was like, well, my gifting or my calling is speaking. And so I want to be able to speak all I can. You know, singing is just kind of like one of those things, you know, down the road. And so I need to learn to use those kind of gifts, those two, because what happens? If I'm neglecting gifts that God has planted inside of me, then I'm not fulfilling the plan that He has for my life in me. I may be going strong and hard with the one thing, but it would be like, for instance, if you lifted weights with your right arm, you know, constantly, and never lifted with your left arm, you know what would happen, right? Number one, you get lopsided, but you know, the other arm would just get weak and lethargic, and this arm would be going strong. And so that's not a fully functional body. And so as a body of Christ, we need to be that way. And so don't just discard things that you have the ability to do, but find ways to utilize them. In fact, Paul was talking to Timothy and he said, look, he said, spend your time going after these things. You know, if you see an area that you might have an interest in or something like that, go after it. And if God blesses you with that, then more power to you, you know. And the interesting thing is he says, but take heed to yourself in what you accomplish and what you do, because as you continue to operate in these giftings that God has given you, you'll save yourself and those who hear you. Interesting, huh? And it's just stuff you never think about. When I was in college, I went to a Indian missions service at a Indian missions, you know, church and everything. It was the pastor was Blue Hot House. I mean, now if that ain't an Indian name, I don't know what is. But we went there, and it was interesting because we had a couple of us students and everything, and we were just there, and he asked me to give a testimony. So I stand up and give a testimony, and because of that, somebody heard what I had said and ended up giving their heart back to God, and it became, you know, they became ministers and everything like that. And so it was funny because the C. Don Burke, who was the Indian Missions Director, love to tell this story that I had given this testimony and this person has turned his life around. And so many times I'm thinking about the fact that I didn't think I had much of a story to tell. I mean, I was a pastor's kid, you know. I grew up kind of in church. I didn't really just kind of go off the deep end. I mean, I made mistakes, but it wasn't one of these whirlwind things like, you know, I was on death's bed and God, you know, rescued me. But at the same time, it was an important part of my journey, and I have to realize that there's other people out there in that same boat. Right? And so, in order to be able to bring redemption to me and then bring redemption to others, I have to realize that my gift is beneficial. Right? And, you know, so many times you may look at things and say that, you know, oh, I'm not that important, or oh, I don't have that certain thing, but every little piece of every little thing. Like, for instance, when you're going into a business, okay? You're going into a business, and if you were to see garbage all over the floor, like somebody had just dumped a garbage can all over the floor, it would make you not want to go in that place, right? Because it'd be like, ooh, somebody's not taking care of this. So we're not talking about, you know, a manager person. We're not talking about any CEO of a company. We're talking about just an employee who goes along and picks up that trash and makes it look more presentable, right? And then what? People come into the store and are ready to come to the store because they're excited, you know. Oh, this looks nice, you know, and walk on in, and then they end up spending money. And so many times we look at the church as different. Because what it is we come to church a lot of the times, and I have been at this point a lot myself, but we come to church a lot of times and are looking for what we can get out of it instead of what we can give into it, right? And just sometimes the fact that, you know, you're here makes it important to the other person. You know, like the fact that we're not a whole lot of people right now, but we have some of us here. That's important to me. You know, if y'all weren't here, I'd feel rough. You know, I don't know about you, but talking to just a camera alone is crazy. You know, it's hard to do. But it's just the fact that everything that we do is beneficial, and God gives us specific gifts for that reason. And then, so, you know, a gift could be faithfulness, could be a gift, you know. Friendliness could be a gift. There are so many different things. I know some people who have a real knack for cleaning. My mother, oh, you know somebody? My mother-in-law loves to clean. And so that's almost like, so if I knew that something needed to be cleaned extra well, I would almost say, hey, Mom, you come help, you know, with this thing, because I know that together we can make it look awesome. But the thing is that it isn't one thing over another, but everything's beneficial. So God gives us gifts, and then those gifts are meant to be used, because otherwise there's no point, right? It's just like, you know, opening a Christmas box and finding out what's in it and throwing it to the side and never coming back and touching it again. Which, funny enough, there are some kids who do that kind of thing, play with the box instead of the toy, right? But it's that point. So in 2 Timothy, this is what I really wanted us to look at. 2 Timothy chapter 1. And this is what's really cool, because if you look at different passages throughout the Word of God, and then also if you look at kind of the defining terms in this setup, it's very interesting, okay? Because, of course, once again, he's admonished, Paul is talking and building up Timothy, who is somebody who is following after Paul, and he's trying to build him up. And so in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, I love this. He's talking about the fact, right before this, he's saying that, you know, your mother and your grandmother were amazing, and I know they've passed this stuff on to you, and I know that you have knowledge and abilities and things like that have come through this process. But in verse 6 he says, therefore I remind you to stir up the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of hands. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. The word stir, guess what? Is to activate. Right? We're stirring it up. We're activating it. Think, if you will, how many of you have been to a bonfire? You know, they have these big old fires, right? And they start to kind of die down a little bit, you know, and then what happens? They go out there and poke it and stir it up a little bit. What? It shoots up again, right? And it's because they're reactivating the things that are already there to combine together, and then it just kind of grows. And it's the same thing in us. And the interesting thing is here, and I love the fact that he says, do not have the spirit of fear. Don't think that your gift is too small. Don't think that what you do is not important. But walk in faith, knowing that God would not have given you that ability if He didn't want you to use it. Right? And so many times we're like, okay, God, this is just something else I can hang on the shelf. Okay, woohoo! When I was a kid, we used to collect, you know, the little trophies, you know, perfect attendance. Now, I don't know why I kept it. You know, or honor roll, or all these, any little thing you could be a part of, you did that. Why? It's because you wanted to show what you know, what I kind of did and everything, but it doesn't benefit me in my journey any longer. It's like, I won the award, thanks, okay, keep on going. But the thing is when we use God's gifts, guess what? It doesn't come to an end. It's a continual journey, and so literally what we do is we take advantage of what God has gifted us in, use that, and then what? Don't put it on the shelf, continue to use it. Like, I'll have to say that I am what you call a jack of all trades, master of none. But there are so many things that I can just, you know, make work and do things. And it's been helpful in ministry and stuff, because there's at times you don't have a whole lot of money to work with things. But guess what? There's still ways to make it happen. Like, for instance, patching this hole. I was like, how's that going to work? And we came up with the wood and all that stuff, and it made it work. And so it's so neat that God has gifted us with so many abilities and talents, and the fact that we can use those for others as well. But the thing is it also benefits us, because guess what? When I use a gift that God has given me, God takes joy in seeing me use His gift. Right? So we're also giving God the glory. And then in doing that, but we also want to be very careful that we continually activate. Okay? Activate means stir it up, you know, bring it back, keep it going. Don't just go one and done, you know. But we have to keep these things going. And the other thing about activating is the fact of actually just doing something. You know, there may be something that you start to do and you're like, I don't really know how to do this or want to do this, but I'm going to do it. You know? And it's interesting the way that God can continue to even move through those pieces. But don't neglect the things that God has given you, because if you fail to use God's gifts, God will stop giving you gifts. Because He sees that you don't want, you know, you don't feel that it's important to use His gifts. And if you're not using these gifts, guess what? Someone out there may not connect with this. Like, remember the other day when those people drove by and said, hey, y'all still having service? If we had not been out there, they would never stop probably, right? And so just that was a thing. And so we're benefiting them, and then we're also benefiting us, but at the same time, God's saying, kind of work on these things. You know, you can't, it's not just something that you can just go out there and it's like magic, you know. But it's one of these things sometimes that you just kind of have to work at a little bit. Yes. The first time I got up and spoke in front of people, I was like, didn't know what I was doing, talking off the wall, whatever. And the more I have done it now, the more I understand, you know, what patterns I need to follow, what kind of words I need to bring out, and things like that. And so have become more confident. But in the beginning, I wasn't that confident. Now, I was always an outgoing person, so I was very freely with speaking. But at the same time, I didn't have that same thing here. So, what I want you to do is, throughout this week, I want you to think of things that God has gifted you with. Okay? no matter how big, no matter how small. Just think about these things. And then think about how you can activate that gift and how it could add benefit to you and add benefit to those around you. Because God wants us to learn to activate these things inside of us to make this world an amazing place.
So that'd be like me working and talking to people about God and stuff.
Exactly. I mean, hey, God gave you the gift of gab.
Yeah, rubbish.
Right? And so, it's talking to people, opening up about those experiences, that's very vital. And I think a lot of times that's underplayed because we think that, we'll just bring them to church and they hear from the pastor, or we'll bring them to Sunday school and they hear from the Sunday school, or we can bring them to an evangelist service, and they can hear this way. But honestly, the most important, valuable message is just a message from somebody they know.